Hello, welcome back to Supposedly Fun. I am Greg. There's a lot going on. I have the dishwasher going in the next room. Hopefully you can't hear it too much. The dogs are going around like crazy, so hopefully it won't be too loud. But I'm here today because I figured I would do something a little bit different from what I've usually done. If you know me well, you know that my favorite TV show currently airing is The Great British Bake Off, or The Great British Baking Show, as we know it here in the US. I am obsessed with it. It is my favorite thing. I just can't get enough of it. A new season is currently airing. It is the 10th season overall, but you know, this is where there's a weird discrepancy between the UK and the US because the first, I believe, 3 seasons have not aired in the US and may never air at this point because the show used to air on PBS when it was on the BBC in the UK, but they skipped to season 4 and aired that first here. I believe it was season 4. So we never got the first 3 seasons of the show because by the time my dogs are still walking around. By the time they got to the point where the show left the BBC, they had never aired the first 3 seasons. So Netflix is airing the current seasons with the new hosts and judges, but I don't know if it's going to come. So because the first 3 seasons had never aired here, I don't really know who won those. None of their books will be reflected in here. This is not an exhaustive, and it is not meant to be an exhaustive portrayal of all of the Great British Bake Off books and all of the contestants on the Great British Bake Off. Jamie, stop it. Sorry. There are turkeys that have been walking up and down the street, hence all of this. So anyway, let's get to it. There are 2 books that are not cookbooks that I'm going to talk about in here. I mentioned this one recently because I read it last month. It's Sue Perkins and her memoir called Spectacles. The part where she discusses her childhood is wonderful. Once she becomes an adult, it's still really good, but I will say it kind of becomes superficial. Like she's not really getting deep anymore, and I thought that made the book lose a little bit of momentum. It's laugh out loud funny, and it did make me cry. And Jamie, bear with me one second. Okay, next is Mary Berry's. It said memoir somewhere on it, but it's actually not a biography because it's talking about her whole life, which I guess it would be the same with Sue Perkins's book, because I believe I've been told that a memoir is supposed to be about one specific point in time, but these both talk about their entire life up to the point it was published. Now, I adore Mary Berry. She's a GD international treasure, one of my favorite people. I will say, and I think what's really good about this book is that it feels like she's telling you a story. And I could listen to Mary Berry tell a story all day, every day, nonstop. The thing is, it does fall into the trap where it feels like, because I already knew some things about her, like I knew the story of her having polio as a child, and I knew that her son had been killed in a car accident. I didn't come away from the book knowing her any more than I did going in. And I think that's because, like, I've said this a lot lately, my big complaint with memoirs is that they tend to be superficial and not really go deep. And this definitely does that. But it's absolutely an enjoyable read. Getting into cookbooks, let's go to the person who used to be Mary Berry's co-judge, or the male judge, as Nancy used to call him, Paul Hollywood. We have 2 of his cookbooks, Paul Hollywood's Bread and How to Bake. Now, we were really excited to get these because my husband worked as a pastry chef when I first met him, and he did not have a whole lot of experience in bread, so who better to learn how to make bread from than Paul Hollywood? So we were really excited about these books. When we got them, you know, they're very well laid out, the photography is great. And by the way, I'm going to be relying on my husband for the cookbooks a lot because I don't bake, and he's the one who's actually made recipes from here. So I'm going to have to go based on his experience. So, and one thing that was also really good is that in a lot of instances where there's a certain technique, they use this photo layout where it really shows you step by step what to do, and that seemed like it was going to be extremely helpful. It does that in several places throughout the book, like how to knead dough. However, my husband has tried to make a couple of recipes from here. My husband already has a great cinnamon roll recipe, but he wanted to try Paul Hollywood's. I know he tried at least one form of bread and something else. Oh, God, I love pancakes. Anytime I see them in a cookbook, it just makes me happy. They didn't turn out very well. Now, I don't understand the metric system because I'm an American and I'm not good at math. So I go by what we use here in America. But in baking, everything gets confused and crossed over. So my husband didn't have problems with like the measurements in the book or anything like that because we had to order these from the UK. They just, for whatever reason, nothing turned out the way it was supposed to. Anytime he's done it. And I think he's tried about 4 or 5 recipes, and it's gotten to the point where anytime he's going to make a kind of bread or something like that, he will look at Paul Hollywood's book and then go with something else. So I don't know if anybody else out there has had the same experience. It would be interesting to find out if it's something with the book or, you know, technique. I don't know. And then just going back to Mary Berry, I have Baking with Mary Berry. This book is a delight as well. There are some things that we've made in here. There are key lime pie bars. I'm just trying to find them. Oh, I'm sorry, they're iced lime bars. We have made these. They turned out really well. They were absolutely delicious. I cannot for the life of me remember what else we made out of... Oh, I made tiramisu for my husband's birthday. So our gig is for your birthday, you pick the kind of cake you want and he'll make it for you. So this past year I said, if you pick something kind of easy, I'll make it for you. And I used Mary Berry's tiramisu recipe because that's what he recommended. It did not turn out pretty because I am not a baker, but it was delicious. So yeah, there you go. So unlike Paul Hollywood's cookbook, we definitely got good results out of this one. Now here's one I absolutely recommend, even if you're not super into cooking or baking. It's Crumb by Ruby Tandoh, who, by the way, is one of my favorite contestants on the show. I just adore her. She's really sweet and smart and talented and doesn't believe that she is talented, which puts a fun little twist on that. And this book is gorgeous. You can tell from right away from the cover, it is just absolutely gorgeous, and it has great recipes in it. But what really appeals to me, I actually sat down and read this because her writing is fantastic. I am not surprised. I think they just started talking about the best American so on of the year, like best American short stories, non-required reading. And they did the food writing, which I believe was edited by Samin Nosrat. And if you have not watched Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat on Netflix, do it right away because it's amazing. It's really good. But she edited it, and I believe I saw Ruby Tandoh's name among the people who contributed to it. And I'm really not surprised. She's a fantastic writer. You could really just get lost in her writing. Oh, God, it's just... I'm sitting here and I'm starting to read it a little bit. Now, we have made several things in here, but the one I really want to talk to you about, I should have bookmarked all of this in advance, and I'm sorry. I did not. I fail at life. It's something I had never heard of until I saw this cookbook. And by the way, there's Ruby, covered in flour. It's called Tiger Bread, and it's basically, it's a bread dough, and when you make it, and by the way, hers has the same process where it breaks down the technique so you can see how to do it, which is really helpful for somebody like me. Where is Tiger Bread? There's the Tiger Bread. So it's a regular bread loaf, but then you put this rice paste over the top, so when it cooks, you get this little crackly texture. It is so good. According to my husband, it's also really easy to make. I have not made it. I don't make bread. But it's delicious. If he makes a loaf of this, we devour it in a single night. There are no leftovers. It's just gone. It's so good. It's got that really nice crispy outside, and it's soft and wonderful in the middle. I mean, that recipe alone is really worth the price of admission for Crumb by Ruby Tandoh. Now we have 2 cookbooks by Martha Collison, who we really adored when she was on the show. She's gone on to have, she was one of the youngest people to compete. I don't know if she's the youngest people. She's gone on to have a really great career in the culinary world and in media. Her first book was this one, which is Crave, and her second book was Twist. We got both of them because we really liked the sound of them. We like her. We're not actually super into the recipes, to be honest with you, so we have not actually used these. We've had them for, I mean, there's a Death by Chocolate Cake, Triple Chocolate Eclairs. It's not that they're bad, but we've really reached toward the other ones instead. I did like the idea of Twist instead. in theory at least, which is that it gives you a basic recipe for something, and then it gives you one or two different ways that you can twist that to bump it up a notch. So there would be like a chocolate cake recipe, and then there will be some ideas on ways that maybe like a chocolate ginger cake. I'm making things up. I should really just stick with what's in the book. So let's see, what is one? Okay, so she'll teach you how to make her vanilla cupcakes, but then you can twist that and make lemon cheesecake cupcakes, or caramel macchiato cupcakes, or toasted marshmallow cupcakes. And we've just never used any of the recipes that are in here, so I can't say if the cookbook is all that great. I love the concept, and I can't say much of anything about the execution. And unfortunately, because I really like the cookbook and the recipes that are in it, I kind of have to say the same thing about Bake It Yourself by Richard Burr, or BIY, because he is a builder. The book takes, it very much takes that builder theme and goes with it, obviously BIY instead of Bake It Yourself. But the recipe layout even is meant to look like plans are always, the recipes are always look, or the photographs, I've lost the ability to talk, all look kind of industrial, and there's construction going on around them. It's really interesting. A lot of the recipes look really good. I'm not into olives, so this looks like just death to me, and not in a good way. But, you know, oh God, pretzels, it all looks really good. We've just never used it. I think ultimately the difference between Richard Burr's cookbook and the Martha Collison cookbooks that we have is that we basically constantly forget about Martha's cookbooks. And we constantly look at this one and think of things that we want to make, but we just haven't gotten around to. So I would say of the two, we're much more likely to get to this one. We've only actually made one recipe out of Chetna Makan's cookbook, Cardamom Trail, and it's this one right here on the cover. So I mentioned our routine for birthdays is that we pick what kind of birthday cake we want, and my husband will make it. So after this book came out, I basically just handed him this and said, I want that. That is, I'll get the exact recipe for you. It is magic. It was so good. It was really, really just amazing. Find it in the cookbook. We also want to do the pear and cardamom caramel upside down cake, which just looks amazing. I've seen her, I follow her on Instagram, and she has made it on there as well, and it is so good. Oh God, I want her almond and coffee cake. There's just so much in here that I would absolutely 100% eat, and I cannot find the recipe for the one that's on the cover. But I know it involves cardamom and pistachio. There it is, pistachio, cardamom, and white chocolate cake. It's so good. And it came out looking just like, pretty much just like this. Yeah, I'm a lucky dude to have a husband who will make this for me for my birthday. Yeah, and I know there are other recipes in here that we want to try. The problem is just, so my husband runs into the same problem with his cookbooks that I run into with my books, which is that we keep bringing in cookbooks, and he has piles and piles and piles of recipes that basically function as his own TBR. And because there are so many of them, you don't get to all of them, and that is kind of what, like how I have been saying for years I want to read Beloved and have not gotten around to it, although I'm looking at doing it in December with a buddy read. That is him with Richard Burr. So, you know, those are a sampling of the Great British Bake Off cookbooks. I don't usually talk about cookbooks because it's not really my area of expertise. You might say it's not my purview, but because my husband has kind of used these, I figured it might be kind of fun to talk about. Like I said, the Great British Bake Off is airing right now. For the first time ever, we are getting installments. Not for the first time ever, because PBS used to do it in weekly installments. But for the first time since it moved to Netflix officially, we get the installments weekly. But for the first time, we are getting them roughly the same time as the UK. They air here, I believe, 3 days after. So the episodes become available on Friday here, and they're available, I think, Tuesday or Wednesday in the UK. So we're a little bit behind, but hopefully that'll prevent spoilers, because I have definitely had spoilers with the show in the past. For instance, just before the season, I don't know which season it was, but the season where Nadia won, just before that aired in the US, she made the birthday cake for Queen Elizabeth II, I believe. So I saw a photo of Queen Elizabeth with the Great British Bake Off winner who made her birthday cake, and it spoiled the whole season. So hopefully I can avoid things like this by having it be so close. But anyway, it's just a little bit of a different topic for you. Cookbooks and a little bit of TV and Bake Off. And I mean, who doesn't love Bake Off? Crazy people. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. I don't know how helpful it was, but I enjoyed doing it. Like I said, it's a nice change of pace. So hopefully, if you're not already subscribed, you enjoyed it enough to follow along on this madness around here. I apologize for the dog craziness. I'll be back again. Until then, happy reading.